Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. I'm Lex Frieden. I'll be your host for today's program. I'm professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, and I direct the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at Tier Memorial Hermann. Have you ever read an article in the newspaper and wondered about the person that wrote the article? Have you ever seen a photograph in a magazine and wondered what motivated that photographer to take that picture? Well, today we have the opportunity to talk to one of those photographers, one who motivated me to contact him and find out what he was up to. Today we're going to meet Nolan Ryan Trowe. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with Focus on Abilities. I'm your host, Lex Frieden. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a special guest, Nolan Ryan Trowe, who's with us from California or New York or wherever he chooses to be from. He's a photojournalist of great note. As a matter of fact, I met him by the New York Times, saw an article that he did with some wonderful photographs. We're going to talk with Nolan about the photographs. We're going to talk about his life experience today. Nolan, welcome to Focus on Abilities.
Hey, thanks Lex for having me. It's a real honor to be here. Appreciate it.
Now, I said you were from New York or California, but what do you regard as home?
California is my home. I grew up there my whole life, about 15, 16 years there. So while I did live in New York for the last couple of years, I definitely consider California to be my home.
Okay. You were kind of an avid sports person a few years ago. Still are an avid sports person, right? What kind of sports do you like best?
Well, I always really liked basketball. Growing up, I played football, baseball, basketball, soccer, pretty much all the way till high school. And even after high school and during high school, I was skateboarding, cliff diving, skiing. So I always did like the team sports thing, but I also was always into extreme sports. And even nowadays, I'm still really into basketball. Not so much football anymore. I guess.
Listen, man, anybody in Texas that hears your name is Nolan Ryan anything, or maybe anybody in the world, is going to think of the pitcher Nolan Ryan, the famous Texas Rangers all-star many times and no-hit pitcher. You get confused like that all the time, or people get confused about you?
Well, I think it's funny because since I've been in Texas, almost any time I pay for anything with my credit card, someone either laughs or smiles, or people get real excited when they see my name. So,
did the hotel offer to give you an upgrade?
No, unfortunately not. But they should.
I don't know. I'd stick with that in Texas. You'd probably go a long way. So Nolan, you did, as I said, publish an article in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. Before that, had you done any real publications with your photo work?
No, not really. Up until I moved to New York, photography was something or other that was just a form of documenting my friends or family or my daily life. And I guess I still used it, even for that article. It was still a form of documenting my daily life. So before that, no, I didn't really take it too seriously, or as in through the photojournalism lens. It was just something I did to document my life.
So you were like a typical millennial, carrying your smartphone around and taking shots, or were you using more sophisticated cameras at that point?
No, I was probably using something that's less sophisticated than a smartphone, because actually up until 2 years ago, I didn't have a smartphone. So I never really had that transition for being a smartphone photographer for the most part. I had this little point and shoot camera that was really tiny, probably like that small.
Really?
Really small, and I mean the iPhone takes better pictures. Any smartphone will take better pictures than this camera did.
Wow.
So
Did you use it for your outdoor sports? I mean, was that camera like one of those sports cameras?
It was just an everyday camera, so if I
Yeah.
happened to be playing sports or
Wow.
skating or whatever, I mean, it was very basic, like super beginner camera, but
Yeah.
it was cool because it just fits in your pocket.
Yeah.
You know, it would stay charged for days at a time, which is really cool. So while it did have its downsides of not being able to do certain things, it was just really portable and really accessible, you know, which is something that's important. You know?
Yeah. So, being a sports person and somebody who kind of took pictures of themselves and others in life, all of a sudden you went cliff diving one day, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Northern California?
Yep, that's correct. The Yuba River.
Was that something you did often?
Yeah, I mean, often enough. Because growing up there, it's just something you did, like get into extreme sports. And during the summertime, you're not skiing so much, so you find other ways to kind of get your adrenaline fix. And that was cliff jumping, because you can jump off and do flips, and you know, just
You and a group of your friends
yeah.
typically go jumping off the cliffs, right?
Totally, yeah.
How high?
Well, it depends. Anywhere from a small cliff could be 5 feet. It could be a big boulder, and then anywhere up to, like, the cliff I jumped off is anywhere from, I don't know the exact height, but I've heard anywhere from like 70 to 90 feet. Is like
70, 90 feet.
But then there's also people who jump off of bridges that are like 110 feet. So
You ever do that?
Nah, I've jumped off bridges, but not like 100 feet. No, I never did.
So
that.
was this day you happened to go cliff diving? Was this the tallest cliff you ever jumped off of?
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is I jumped off that cliff a number of times before that, so it wasn't the first time I had jumped off of it. But yeah, people actually have died. A lot of people died jumping off that cliff.
So, but you were still inclined to do it. Gave you that much of a rush, right?
Yeah, it was sort of. At first, it was more of a spiritual thing, because I had a friend pass away when I was a kid, and growing up, he was the only one who was brave enough to ever jump off of it. And so after he passed away, myself, his brother, and a really close friend of ours took some of his ashes there, and we threw it off the cliff and then jumped into the water. So at first it was like just kind of a spiritual thing to be more connected to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to find out what happened after you jumped, the last time you jumped off that cliff. But first we're going to take a short break from focus here.
Okay.
So hang in there. You all stay tuned with us, and we'll be right back with more Focus on Abilities and Nolan Ryan Trowe. You're watching Focus on Abilities on HTV. I'm Lex Frieden. Our guest today is Nolan Ryan Trowe. Nolan, what was it, morning, afternoon you went cliff diving?
It was an afternoon.
Afternoon, pretty day, Northern California, skies were blue, the water was smooth. You're standing on top of that cliff thinking about, this is going to feel so good, sliding through the air 90 miles an hour, 90 feet high. It's just going to feel so great, going to hit that water. And you jumped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
next?
And so, yeah, I jumped from anywhere from 70 to 90 feet, and I jumped feet first, and I didn't break the surface tension of the water, which I don't know if a lot of people know is actually very high, and if you don't break it properly, it's like hitting concrete for like a split second. So that's essentially what I did. I jumped from this height, and the impact of the water was like hitting concrete for a fraction of a second, but that was enough. The weight of my body coming down with that tension coming up was enough to give me a T12 spinal cord injury and a burst fracture in my L1.
So it cracked the vertebrae in your lower back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's more like the middle back.
Yeah, the L1 is pretty
Yeah.
close to middle, yeah.
Yeah. When you hit the water, could you tell it was wrong, that it was a bad landing?
Yes, immediately, yeah, immediately. It's weird to think about the concept of feeling something going numb. It seems counterintuitive to feel something going numb, but that's what it felt like when I hit the water. I felt like this rush. It felt like my blood was exchanged with like ice water, And all of a sudden, you know, I knew something was wrong because I went really far down in the water, and my legs were just like wobbling, and I was trying to move them, they weren't moving. But I think instinctively, you know, I just started breaststroking, and I didn't really fully realize what had happened at the moment. I thought maybe I had just severely broken my legs, because I don't think you ever feel like, oh, I'm paralyzed.
So any pain at all?
Yeah, a ton of pain.
So when you hit it, everything went cold, couldn't move, had pain like shot up in your head, and you're dog paddling to the surface, right?
Yeah, actually breaststroke to a rock that was protruding from the pool I jumped into, and I just held on to the rock because I didn't know what had happened. And I yelled up to my friends because I was the first one to jump, and I said, hey, I was yelling, I broke my legs, not quite in those words, something more explicit. And then another guy who I wasn't even with, this guy named Zach, jumped in. He happened to be a lifeguard, and he swam up to me and he said, what's wrong? I said, I don't know, I think I broke my legs. And he swam me over to the shallow part of the pool. And
so this guy was just hanging out there, I mean, he's swimming in the water.
He was just hanging out on because there's like this big cliff on,
right.
What would that be, the north side, I think. And on the south side, there's smaller cliffs. And so my friends didn't know if I broke my legs because it was shallow, so they had to run all the way around and then jump in. But so he was closer, he was already right there, and he heard me say that, so he just jumped in.
Pulled you over to the shore then?
Yeah.
What, did he know to lay you out? I mean, was he careful with you?
Well, the good thing is, yeah, he was a trained lifeguard. I think he's actually trained paramedic too.
Yeah.
So I got real lucky with that.
That was fortuitous.
That was fortuitous. And my friend Cooper, actually, who I was with, is real knowledgeable in CPR, and he's not a paramedic, but he knows a lot about the body. And so they're really smart. They didn't bring me onto the surface. They just had me floating in about like a foot of water.
Wow.
And the water is actually ice cold because it's all snow melt. So I mean, I've told doctors this, I really think because the water is so cold that it reduced the amount of swelling to my spinal cord because I was in that water for hours.
That's a remarkable theory.
Yeah, I think it really had something to it.
So you were lying there for a long time?
Yeah, like 3 hours, I think.
They kept you there while they were waiting on the ambulance to come?
Oh, there's no ambulance. It's a
Wait a minute, man. You break your back and there's no ambulance, right?
No.
Where was this, like in some really remote place?
Yeah, so first off, it's in a remote part off the highway, and then it's a probably 2-3 mile hike down in this canyon. So there's no cell reception. It's really, I mean, you have to rock climb parts of it to get down. So one of my friends, while Zach and my friend Cooper were stabilizing my body, my other friend, he ran up to try to get cell service to call for what's it called, a helicopter lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Yeah.
They sent an evacuation helicopter for you, and with paramedics on it, I guess.
No, actually, it was. Well, it was actually lucky.
This local dude with the helicopter comes and plucks you out of the water, right?
No, it was actually the CHP, California Highway Patrol, which is actually super lucky because had it been a care flight, it would have cost me 40 grand out of pocket, 50 grand out of pocket. Wow. But because it was a CHP, that's why it took a little bit longer, because they tried to coordinate to where the CHP could come get me. That way it wouldn't be an out of pocket cost. So,
right.
Yeah, the CHP flew me to their headquarters, and then it was a short ambulance ride to the hospital. So I had to pay for that, which was like a few $100s, but it beats a $40,000 airlift flight.
Well, but much less having a broken back. I mean, if they didn't know how to care for you, you might have been injured much worse. So they took you to the hospital. They determined that you had a spinal cord injury. They could see the break in the bone. They saw the neurological damage. What'd they do then? They didn't do any surgery, or they did?
They did. They did emergent surgery.
So they stabilized the spinal cord with the surgery.
Yeah.
And then where'd you go after that? To rehab?
Yeah, so I was in ICU for, I always forget, it's like somewhere between 7 and 10 days. I don't quite remember, because I was like on an intravenous morphine trip, and that whole thing is just a blur to me, kind of.
Yeah.
But afterwards, I went to Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, which is in San Jose,
right?
Because the surgeon at Roseville had told me, you know, their acute inpatient rehab is much better there for spinal cord than it is here.
Very good there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what'd you learn while you were in rehab?
Oh man, a
They
lot.
tell you were gonna would or wouldn't walk. I mean that's the first question they have to ask, right?
Well, yeah. I remember even before that, right before the surgery, just being in the X-ray room and the X-ray technician just looking at me like.
That's got to feel bad.
It felt real bad, and he said, I think his exact words were, I said, what's the prognosis, or I said something like that, and he said, it's looking very bad, which is what he told me. And, I could just see in his eyes, he was just like, this is not good. And so
before a doctor ever told you, you kind of had a sense of what went down.
Kind of. It's weird. That whole day is like such a weird amalgamation of memories and like drug-induced kind of. It's like I don't know. Like
been there, done that. I know.
Yeah.
That. So when you actually did get to talk to the doctors who had examined you and so on, and they told you your prognosis, what did they tell you would be your prognosis? Because at that point, you don't know if you're going to walk or what.
They never gave me a definite answer, but I do remember on the last day of ICU, it was right before they transferred me to Santa Clara. They sat me on the end of the bed and they said, Nolan, try to move your legs. And I was like, nah, I can't do it. And they said, just try. And so I tried, and both of my legs slightly moved. And the doctors told my family, this is really good because it means the nerve pathways are still connecting.
Yeah.
And so they said, who knows, that might be all he gets is that slight movement, but it's a good sign that those connections are still working.
So that was what, 2 years ago, right?
3 years ago today, this is the 3-year anniversary.
So this is your anniversary.
It's my alive day.
Well, you gonna have a dinner in honor of your 3rd year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe you'll come over to the house.
Cool. Yeah, I'd
okay.
like that.
But in the last 3 years, you've been continually improving?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of an up and down thing. It's like, you improve for a while, you hit a plateau for a while. It's like anything. I mean, even when you're like learning a new instrument or something, you have this rapid progression, and then suddenly that progression gets slower and slower because things get more technical.
So you don't use a wheelchair now, but you can ambulate. You use 2 canes, one in each hand, and you just have to move slowly and rest.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah.
All right, we're going to come back with more Nolan Ryan Trowe right after this break. Please stay tuned to Focus on Abilities. You're watching Focus on Abilities on HTV. We have Nolan Ryan Trowe here. I'm Lex Frieden, and we've been talking about cliff diving and breaking necks and photography. So Nolan, you after rehab, did you go back to school? You were in school, right?
Yeah, so after about 1 year of really intense physical rehab, I applied to a master's program in New York City at NYU, and I was accepted.
A master's program in what?
Humanities and sociology. And it was also like a focus on human rights too.
What motivated you to want to study sociology?
I guess I've always really been interested in, I guess I see sociology as a form of anthropology in a way too. So I'm always interested in how society is working and how people are interacting with each other, different groups of communities. Like it's just fascinating to me.
So you break your neck, you have this life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a background, a lifetime interest in sociology and the way people behave, and you have this natural talent to be able to frame photographs and take great pictures, right? With that, then you moved to New York City, and that inspired you to go out and take pictures for the New York Times?
Yeah, I guess it started out, I had no real intention of actually becoming a photojournalist, to be honest. I took a photojournalism class, and through that, I had learned some techniques of storytelling and, just basic things. And because of my disability, I ended up gravitating towards certain issues and photographing those things. And it was actually a mentor of mine who I had met who really pointed out to me like the importance of what I was photographing and kind of helped me see the more critical lens of it. Because at first I had just, I moved to New York City, I connected with the disabled community. These were sort of my friends. These were my friends. And so I was sort of doing what I was doing before.
So how did you connect with these people? I mean, you didn't know people in the disability community in New York before you moved there, right? How'd you connect?
So for a midterm I have for a photojournalism class, we got to just do whatever we want. And at first, being interested in sports, I wanted to go photograph a wheelchair basketball league. So I went to a wheelchair basketball game, and there I met one of my really good friends. And from there we just started hanging out. He introduced me to some of his friends, and we all clicked and just became like, it's just a real beautiful kind of natural connection. Wow. Yeah.
So that was nice. And then you, I heard you describe once the mirror theory. Tell us about that.
Okay, so when I was using my wheelchair, or this could be for anyone actually, but I noticed people would stare at me more, and so that stare would make me feel uncomfortable. And so I used my camera as a way to reflect the stares of other people at me back at them. And actually, I got kind of inspired from it because I saw a short video of, it was a short documentary in India where a woman is wearing a necklace that has a mirror on it, like right here. So every time a guy would like stare at her, they would see their reflection and, see what they're looking at, and it would like kind of freak them out.
So when you're taking pictures of people who are staring at you, did anybody ever get angry at you and make you want to put the camera down? Did they get embarrassed and try to hide the fact they were staring at you? How did most people behave?
I think most people, I would imagine, felt some sort of shame, perhaps. Some people would just go right on staring. Some people would look away. It really depends, but I think most people would, it's like when you catch anyone staring at you, they kind of look away real quick.
And why did you think they were staring at you?
To be honest, I really don't know. I think it's because the wheelchair is just not normalized in society. And so when they see people with disabilities out in the world, like living a normal life like anyone can and should, they're sort of, I think there's a confusion as, why is this person in this space? I don't really see people in this space.
So they're trying to figure it out. They're wondering, they may not be doing it for bad cause. They may just be curious and thinking while they're looking, and that causes them to stare.
Yeah, I think it goes a couple different ways. I think some people do it, and it's a little more, I think it's less curiosity and more just objectification, perhaps, of just being very rude and staring at it, and sort of fetishizing it in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, given your background, where do you see people with disabilities fitting into the world now? You've obviously documented through your photographs, and we've seen some of them while we've been talking. You've documented the fact that the world is not very friendly sometimes to people with disabilities. People and the environment in particular. The people in New York trying to get down to the subway and having to drag themselves down in their wheelchairs. What's your take on all that?
I mean, for the future, I hope that people with disabilities, we don't even have to think about that. It'll just be normal for them to be in society. We won't have to worry about accessibility like elevators and stairs. We won't have to worry about someone getting stared at because they're using a wheelchair. We won't have to worry about, discrimination in the job sector or housing or any of that, because, hopefully in time, people will just not think anything of disability. It'll just be, we're just humans. It won't be a big thing to see someone in a wheelchair, someone with canes, or someone who's blind, like using a stick, or even people with invisible disabilities, My hope is that it just won't even be a factor. It'll just be normal.
And you intend to continue documenting society's treatment of people with disabilities with your camera?
Of course, yeah.
You're going to make a career of that?
Yeah, I hope to. Yeah, that's my mission. That's my goal.
That's really cool. it's neat that you feel like you have a mission. You probably never expected that before you went cliff diving that day?
No, I didn't, and I think that's sort of I think it's cool how you can always change your perspective on something that may have seemed terrible to you 3 years ago. Now, I can look back on it and be like, wow, there's actually a lot of beautiful things that happened because of that.
Nice way to end this interview. Nolan, thank you for being our guest today. It's been a learning experience for me, I think for everybody who's watched the program. Your photographs in the New York Times, they can Google those. You've got a Twitter page, Nolan Ryan Trowe.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a website. What's your website is
nolanryantrowe.com. It's just my name.
Okay.
Yeah.
So check it out. Please be in touch with Nolan. He'd be glad to hear from you. And we appreciate you watching Focus on Abilities today. Nolan, thank you.
Thank you, Lex. I really appreciate it.
This has been Focus on Abilities with Lex Frieden. Nolan Ryan Trowe has been our guest. We appreciate you watching HTV and particularly Focus on Abilities. Tune in next time for another great show on HTV. This is Lex Frieden. Thank you again for watching.